gives me great pleasure to welcome our first speaker, who is an author to the Citizen Health Special Journal. Please may I introduce to you Irfan Khan. Irfan Haider Khan is an architect and a research scholar who is passionate about creating sustainable and climate-resilient architecture. Currently serving as an architect at the Central Public Works Department, Government of India, he is currently pursuing his doctoral thesis titled Performance Evaluation of Vertical Greenery Systems for Energy-Efficient Architecture, a case of Delhi. Irfan's research interests include building integrated vegetation, landscape urbanism, and environmental design. With over 12 years in the industry, he has successfully designed and executed innovative projects that seamlessly integrate green solutions. He has also published and presented his work at various national and international forums. Irfan is here to share with us his insights and findings on how vertical greenery systems can enhance the performance and aesthetics of buildings, and what the barriers are to their implementation in Delhi, India. Irfan, please come to the stage.
So good morning everyone, and thank you Audrey for the introduction. Today we're going to be talking about vertical greenery systems. So we are trying to evaluate their performance in terms of how well they can help in climate change mitigation in Delhi, India. So like Audrey said, that this is a part of a project that, of an article that gets submitted to the special issue. So it's co-authored by my supervisor, Dr. Tayyab Amanabha. I'm glad that you did talk about the urban challenges, and that is really the starting point of our research, because urbanization is a crucial issue when we talk about climate change. In fact, the 6th assessment report of the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, they established that rapid and uncontrolled urbanization is a major contributor to climate change. Not the only contributor, but of course a very huge role to play. And to give an idea of how urbanization affects or exacerbates the climate change. So in 1990, if we look at the global population, only 40% of the people were living in urban areas, and it is projected that almost 70% of this population will be living in urban areas by 2050. But this is a very conservative figure, because if you look at the 2023 urban area population, almost 60% is already living there. So to reach 70% in 2050, I think we are going to exceed that. But having said that, urbanization in itself is of course not an issue. We cannot really control urbanization, we cannot reduce it, and we should not. So we have to look at ways how to adapt to that. But the issue is not urbanization. The issue is that this 60%, the 57% of the urban population is responsible for 75% of global greenhouse gas emissions, which is a huge factor. And out of this 75%, almost 27% buildings are responsible for 27% of these emissions, and these emissions, we're only talking about the building operations. We're not talking about the construction industry or the material industry. And that's a huge figure. That's the highest emissions due to any sectors. Again, the IPCC 6th assessment report presented a very important finding that countries with the lowest levels of emissions are actually more vulnerable to climate change, and therefore have a higher burden of adaptation. And India is one such example. With the highest population in the world, India is responsible for only 4% of global emissions, the CO2 emissions, the historic emissions. But yes, of course, 4% is not less, it's not less by any means. But if you look at the population to emissions ratio, that's very insignificant, especially when we look at the global comparisons, like the US, for example, are responsible for 19% emissions alone. And to give an idea of how climate change, the issues that are arising due to climate change in Indian cities, we look at pollution as one of the major issues. The 6 out of the top most polluted cities are in India, so pollution is a major issue. And Delhi, the capital city of India, is the most polluted city in the world, so that is one major concern. And in fact, a recent report by the Air Quality Life Index report that suggested that because of this pollution that is happening due to urbanization and climate change, Delhi residents are losing on almost 12 years of life. So the life expectancy has been reduced significantly. And it's a major concern. At the same time, if we look at India as a whole, India is responsible for 76% of deaths that happen in South Asia due to PM 2.5 pollutions. So that is, of course, the highest share. And that, of course, has to do with the population, but at the same time, the pollution levels that are increasing rapidly, and we're not doing enough to handle them. But of course, pollution is not the only issue. Climate change, like anywhere else in the world, Indian cities are experiencing extreme weather events, including heat waves, droughts, and floods. So we really have to, introspect and do something about it, because currently we are trying our best to, transition to clean energy and things like that. But we're not very focusing on climate change per se. And also the challenges for the built environment is, of course, the emissions. But at the same time, energy consumption by buildings is huge, and that's one of the major reasons that we are talking about these solutions. So buildings are responsible for 34% of the total global energy consumption. That is the highest amongst any sectors, more than the transportation and the industries, which we generally perceive to be, more energy intensive. But what are the solutions? It's not like, of course, the situation is very grave, it's a serious concern, but gladly there are solutions that work. There's research to support that they can, if done the right way, they can help us. And in fact, a very good resource is Project Drawdown. It's a US-based organization. So they have really documented a lot of solutions that work, that can work, and if optimized at a larger scale. So for buildings, also they propose these 13 different solutions that you can see on the screen. So we are focusing on the nature-based solutions primarily because these solutions NBS are very underutilized and under-researched as compared to other solutions that you look on the screen. For example, high energy, high efficiency air conditioning systems or high efficiency glass, because these systems are already existing and are being practiced. But if you look at nature-based solutions, they are, like I said, underutilized and under-researched, and we really need to look at them. And in fact, in some of the sessions yesterday also, we saw that they have the potential to, really combat the challenges of climate change. So nature-based solutions, in fact, play a very key important role. A recent paper that was published in Nature, it said that if we are to implement all these nature-based solutions the right way in major cities, we can achieve carbon neutrality by 2030, and which is really a very important thing, because right now, if we talk about globally, what UN is also focusing on, we are trying to be net zero by 2030 and things like that. But also, of course, not all nature-based solutions have the equal share of it, depending on the scale, building level, urban scale, or each of these solutions can, contribute in a different way. But being an architect myself, we are focusing on vertical building systems in buildings. And there's a lot of research, there's already a lot of documentation that is there that proves that these systems work and they have a lot of benefits to offer. Environmental benefits like air quality improvement, improved thermal comfort, economic benefits that not only do they improve the thermal comfort, but they also improve the value of the building in terms of property value, the higher rental rates. Then social benefits, of course, like Lorian presentation discussed yesterday, that they have a very important effect on the health and well-being of the users, reduction in stress and things like that. So of course there are a lot of potentials, and these benefits that you see on the screen, they are based on empirical research that has been done. So it's not like just hearsay or just perception. There are studies that have already proven this. And in fact, IPCC, which is a major body that deals with the challenges of climate change, they have identified VGSs as a key measure to climate change mitigation. But at the same time, they also consider them as controversial, so to speak, because of two reasons. Primarily, it's because there's not enough research to support it. And the other thing is that because they are like dynamic living systems, it's very difficult, it's very challenging to understand the true behavior of these systems. So despite the proven benefits that they offer, there's a lot of apprehension in VGS adoption, particularly in the users and of course the legislators among countries. And the major barriers that exist are, of course, the high maintenance, high costs, lack of awareness, people are not really aware about the benefits, also, and they are not very aware of the potential of these systems. But most importantly, there's very poor market support, especially if we talk about India. So we are currently like just borrowing these systems from the Western counterparts, and there's not enough research that's being done, not enough local solutions to it, and also there are no incentives currently. If you talk about like green building certifications, if you talk about like LEED or BREEAM, they do not really consider them as a potential sustainable solutions. But like Mr. Ruben discussed yesterday, GSAF at least they are considering it in EcoLeaf, and because they're focusing on vegetation, so I see potential there. But the current green building solutions, certifications that are there in India, including the local GREHA system, they really don't focus on these systems. So why are we talking about VGS in Delhi? One is because, of course, the population, which is the second most populated city in the world. And at the same time, if we look at the green space that is available in Delhi, Delhi is in fact one of the greenest city in India, but at the same, like you can see, the average green space per person is 15.93 square meter, which is slightly higher than the WHO standard of 9.5 square meter for healthy living. But this 16 square meter is of course not uniform. If you look at the 9 districts of Delhi, you can see those red and orange areas, the northeast and the east district. For example, the northeast district has only 1.74 square meter of green area per person, which is very less. And it's also interesting because this is the part, the east and northeast part is where the river Yamuna is. So if you look at that location and all, this really is a very interesting issue there. So why are we talking about VGSs? Of course, there's a lack of green space. So even if you're not looking at them as potential climate change mitigation measures, we're also not looking at them as greening the cities because we don't have enough space. Judith also highlighted this, that there's not enough space to green an urban area. So we're not really exploring these options. But at the same time, I'd like to point out this, that like what we are doing, what my research, we are not really marketing the system. We're not really trying to force it upon. We're just trying to understand why are we not exploring it, because if there's no evidence to support their use, there's no evidence to reject them also. So currently India is at a very interesting point, because we are, like I said, transitioning to green energy. We are focusing on being carbon neutral by 2070, and by 2030 we have to reduce the emissions by 50%. But at the same time, when we're developing all these policies and regulations, these systems, VGSs, and in fact, for that matter, any major waste solution, they don't really find any mention in the policies. So most of the solutions that are being focused in these policies are active solutions like solar and things like that. But interestingly, the Ministry of Environmental, Forest and Climate Change, which is the key body that frames these policies, they do realize that they have the potential, and because the extent of the climate change effect that is happening in Indian cities, so we have to look at all the possible solutions before rejecting them or accepting them. So we really need to understand. And of course, there's already, like I said, a slow adoption of these strategies and the challenges because of the maintenance and cost. But perceptions are the key, are the real key point here, and which is what we are trying to study in this particular study. So this gap we have to bridge. Like I said, we have to really explore all the possible options. But at the same time, Delhi has a very unique challenge because of its climate, because it's a composite climate. So it has it's very hot in summers and it's very cold in winters. So it goes up to 45 degrees in summers, peak summers, and the temperatures drop down to almost 1 degree in winters. So really, because of these systems being this dynamic and living systems, so that add a lot of stress to the plants. So of course we have to address that part also, but at the same time it's not impossible, like we have seen in the research that has happened. So what are we doing about this VGS in Delhi? So Maya currently, what we are working on, it's a 3-part research project. So it's a holistic performance evaluation. We're looking at the environmental impact, the economic impact, and the social impact of implementing these systems in Delhi. And through that, we're trying to understand what are the barriers, why are we not adopting it, and if at all it's possible to optimize these systems for the Indian need. So to begin that, we have to really look at who are the shareholders in these systems. So of course, the building owners and property owners, because they are the key decision makers, so we have to really understand their point of view. And at the same time, built environment professionals, including architects, horticulturists, landscape architects, engineers, and so on. Then, of course, vendors and suppliers, because right now what is happening in India is that these systems are more of a product than a system or than as a solution. So they're really being marketed as a product. And the maintenance professionals, because we know that they are high maintenance, so we have to really find out ways how we can reduce this maintenance or how best we can maintain, and if at all it is possible to do it in a better way. Then of course the developers and real estate agents, because they really drive what happens in the market or what will succeed in the market. And finally the government and policy makers, like I said, that there are no policies regarding that. But fortunately, as we speak, the next master plan of Delhi is being developed. So they're really exploring the green blue infrastructure. But having said all the the stakeholders, the key decision makers are the environmental professionals, architects, landscape architects, and of course the building owners. So understanding their perception is where we really started from. So we wanted to understand how do they perceive them, what are the benefits that they think they offer, and what are the challenges. So to do that, we conducted a qualitative study, we conducted a survey, and this is what we found. So there were 266 participants, majority of them were architects. Now interestingly, if you look at the figures of landscape architects and other professionals, there's very small sample size. So there are primarily two reasons. One, when we did our pilot study, we also had focus groups where we discussed about these things, and we realized that architects are the key decision makers actually when we talk about BGS, because sadly the current practice in India is that there's a huge disconnect between architects and landscape architects and engineers. So architects are really the primary force who are able to convince the clients or who are able to use them. But at the same time, they do know what are BGSs, but they had no prior experience of BGSs. Majority of them had no prior experience. And also those who had some experience, they had never worked in Delhi. Interestingly, another thing I'd like to point out here is when we talk about BGS or when we talk with the professionals about BGSs, they only perceive about BGS as the vertical gardens or the green walls or the modular systems. They did not really think of the climbers or creepers as these systems, which is very important here. So the perception that you see here, it could be biased towards the vertical garden, against the vertical garden, because they're really not looking at the green climbers as these systems. So we also try to understand how often do they work with it, what is the feasibility that they think about. So most of them, they thought that it's technically feasible, it's challenging, but at the same time they were happy with the performance at least. So I have been shown the 5 minutes, so I'll just quickly talk about what are the percent. So benefits that they offer, so they are based on the literature review, but at the same time we also conducted focus groups. So these benefits, the 16 benefits that they came out of it, were a result of all the discussions which participants highlighted. And we have grouped them in 3 categories and across different regions. So I'll just quickly summarize. I'm not going to get into the details of each of the benefits, but I'll just quickly summarize. So the environmental benefits and the social benefits were rated higher. Primarily, most importantly, the aesthetic or the visual appeal of buildings being improved is the most highly ranked potential, followed by the reduction in temperatures. But interestingly, they do not really consider economic benefits of BGSs, and in fact, they think that even if there is some economic benefit, that's not significant enough. Now, we try to compare it with the user's perception, the professional's perception with the user's perception. So that was a separate study that was not included in this paper. But we had similar observations. But interestingly, the users perceive the social benefits of the system as more significant than the environmental or the economic. So they think of them like improving the health and well-being, stress, and all those things. They consider it as more important as compared to the cost or the reduction of temperatures or things like that. So we know the benefits, but what are the challenges? So we try to understand the challenges also. Again, we discussed this in focus groups. So there were 4 groups of challenges: the technical, financial, environmental, and design challenges. So again, we asked them to rate these challenges. So again, interestingly, so even though they believe that there are no economic benefits, the technical challenges and the economic challenge, the financial challenges were the highest rated. So the cost is really what is the major barrier. That is what we realized during our discussions also. The cost is the driving factor which is really impeding the progress. So again, we compared it with user perception. Interestingly, the challenges due to design and aesthetics were rated less significant by the users as opposed to the professionals who are actually responsible for the design. So that was there. So now also, after having seen the benefits and challenges, we also try to understand what can we do to address these concerns. So we asked the participants to really discuss what can we do. So the word cloud is in between. So we conducted interviews. So they really think, of course, that user has to be educated. They really have to work on the maintenance and how best we can deal with it. But the most important part is we talked about can they help in climate change mitigation. So the majority of the participants agree that yes, they have the potential to mitigate the climate change, and they have very strong positive views regarding that. And even if they did not have very strong views, they at least were positive but not negative. So they think that yes, they can help in climate change mitigation, and yes, they can enhance the energy efficiency in buildings. But at the same time, there were some very strong negative points also, negative views also. Particularly the landscape architects, they're very averse to these systems, primarily because of two reasons. One is that they think that they're not the best solutions to the climate of Delhi, like the climate of Delhi. And the secondly, that they think that the current systems that are there in Delhi, they are more of a greenwash, so to speak. So this image that you see on the right is the most prevalent system there. Like you can see, it's not really very sustainable currently, and like I said in the beginning, that we are not really trying to optimize the solution. We're not really trying to look at the solution. And just like we saw a lot of vertical gardens yesterday when we visited the pavilions, like the AI Village Pavilion or the Italian Pavilion and the Jordan. So we know that there are multiple ways of doing that. But sadly, back in India, we are not really doing, we're not really exploring. We're not even trying to explore. So that is one of the biggest challenges. But at the same time, we have to understand that these solutions alone cannot be the solutions to climate change. We have to look at them holistically. We have to balance things out. And to do that, we need long-term studies, particularly region specific. So I'll just quickly summarize. So the professionals agree that these systems have all the benefits and challenges, but at the same time, they believe that they are increasing in popularity. So of course, there is potential there. And at the same time, they believe that the user education and engagement and their own, they need more information to do that. So of course, it gives us the benefit to conduct further research in this area. So to conclude, we realize that the slow and limited adoption of BPS is there, of course, but at the same time, at least the professionals are beginning to understand their importance in climate change mitigation. So we can at least hope for optimization of these solutions. And we have to really address the deterrents, which are high maintenance and high cost, and there's huge lack of region-specific solutions. One thing I'd like to point out is when we were doing our literature review, there were only 2 studies that were done in India, and they were very specific to the impact of EGS on the temperature reduction alone. That's it. They did not go beyond that. One of the study also talked about the stormwater management due to green walls, but they also really just replicated the impact of a green roof and just copied it to the green wall. So that's not there. So there's a huge gap there. There's not enough studies, and like I said, because of these systems being so dynamic, we cannot really replicate the findings of European or Western studies to the Indian context. So again, like I said, they believe that they're technically feasible and we can optimize them. And even if they're not being recognized for their impact on climate change, they're being recognized for the urban aesthetics and temperature reduction. So we have to really look at a larger strategy to address the climate change. And of course, we need further research to understand these barriers. And this is what we're working on. This is what we're trying to achieve in this. So that was it. So I'll just quickly tell about what we are doing. So what is next for us? So like I said, it's a 3-part research. This was the first phase of my research. So currently, we're working also on the environmental impact of PGSs, where we're conducting their impact on the thermal comfort, the energy consumption. So we're doing simulation, we're doing all these things. And this research is already done and it's under review right now. So we publish it soon. At the same time, we're also looking at the social impact of it. So we're looking at the visual appeal of buildings. We're using eye tracking to understand where people look at and how we can, enhance the design of these systems. And besides this, we're also working with some with EEG and heart rate variability to look at if they have any effect on reduction in stress and things like that. And finally, we're going to understand the economic impact of it through a cost-benefit analysis. And like I said, cost is a very important issue in for any product in India. So despite having all these benefits and everything, if they are costly, they're not going to use it. So we really have to look at a very thorough cost-benefit analysis. So that's what is next for us. I think that's it for it. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Elfyn. So that was really interesting. Thank you. You've got some challenges. You've addressed them quite interestingly. Your research is making great progress. We've got some questions that come through the app, which is really interesting. In terms of your vertical greening systems, you mentioned climbers. You've shown some examples of those vertical pots. So there's different types of plants, but are there plants in the daily context that you're really looking at?
So what we did is like I said, I showed you one of the studies with how we're trying to understand the environmental impact. So what we did is we compared the modular pot system and the climber system. So we really looked at the native vegetation that is there, and because maintenance, we understand that maintenance is an issue. So we looked at all the plants that were really low maintenance and durable, and we of course we not published it, but we really realized that green facade, the climbers and the things like they are much better when we talk about, especially the current system. So yes, we are looking at the vegetation, but we're not going into the detail of like what Judith is doing. But yes, we are looking at that aspect also.
Interesting. Good luck with that. Some comments very much about Delhi being a very challenging climate. You alluded to that. Today, reports are that the air quality index in Delhi is 225, which is very high. Is reducing air pollution part of your work? What is the authorities and ministry doing about that?
Yeah, so currently we are not doing that, but as a part of our review also we did conduct some studies where we studied the air quality index. But hopefully in the next phase of our project, that is our next aim, where we're looking at air quality. But just to quickly give you an idea, there are some studies that were done in that, and they found that these systems, because currently all the systems that are there, especially these vertical green systems that are there in Delhi, they were being used as solutions to reduce the air pollution, but they have failed, and then they failed drastically. So we are trying to understand why they have failed, because we know that they have the potential to reduce pollution, but why they are not working, they really have to look at it. So that is the next phase of our research.
Oh, interesting, and there might be some good conversation with you and Judith and Markham about the work that they're doing at reducing that. We know AIPH is the world's champion for the power of plants, so when you bring in plants and nature, that increases biodiversity. Is the contribution to the biodiversity of your own ecosystem including the performance of vertical greening systems?
Yes. So in fact, I did not go into the detail of the benefits, but yes, that was one of the benefits that was highlighted, especially by the landscape architects. That yes, they are increasing biodiversity. And interestingly, one of the case studies that we conducted on our thermal study, we were studying that also. So we realized that it increased, the birds that were in that area. And that is very interesting because the study that we did was in the East Delhi region, where we saw that there was a highly dense region. So yes, so we realized that it has a direct impact on it. So that is again something we look forward to exploring it further in the next phase.
Excellent. Always lots more research to do, isn't there? One last question that we've had posted. Two more questions. With weather in Delhi, there are extreme fluctuations and you get heavy rainfall in summers. How do you think your vertical greening systems are going to withstand the challenges of changes in temperature, flooding, rainfall?
So the benefit of the modular system that we saw here is that we can change the plants, so because there's a huge variety of plants in India. So we can really select plants for each season. So that's easy to do in a vertical garden like pots like this. But when you talk about green facade with climbers and all that, so that is a bigger challenge. So as part of one of the study that is already done, we realized that yes, there is a very huge effect on the temperature variation, and especially the monsoon. But we also found out that these EVA systems were actually very helpful in maintaining the thermal comfort during monsoons, because it gets very humid in Delhi, and it's very difficult to, and so it increases the air conditioning cost and all that. But we found out that these systems are actually helping in maintaining the thermal comfort. So far we have realized that yes, the climate is a challenge, but at the same time, yes, these systems, they're trying to at least balance these things. So I hope that we're able to further achieve better results in that.
Excellent. You described so many benefits that plants do bring. Just one final question. In your research, are you investigating and can you report on the percentage decrease in energy consumption?
Yes, that is exactly what we are doing in the first phase of it. So the first phase is already done, and like I said, we are going to publish it. So far we realized that the green facades, the climbers, were able to reduce temperatures by up to 8 degrees in Delhi, and the vertical gardens, the green walls, they were able to reduce up to 14 degrees Celsius temperatures. And as a result of that, the energy cost reduced significantly. In fact, we found out that every 1 degree of temperature reduction helped in almost 5% of savings in energy consumption, which is huge. But interestingly, in India, because air conditioning is not, it's not a very common thing, especially in the village, and we're not really dealing with HVAC systems at a larger scale. These systems really help in bringing down the energy consumption and at least have like I said, increasing the thermal comfort also. So yes, that is in fact a key component of our research.
Well, that's very good to know. Thank you. And David, thank you. He's posted a link to Living Architecture Performance Tool, so I'm sure you'll have a look at that. Evan, thank you very much again for a very interesting presentation.